Welcome to another edition of Tom Bear One Thoughts. Hope all is well, guys. And it's 2018, and I'm reminiscing, thinking about the days when I was a child, in the 80s, there, late 80s, mid 80s, early 90s. If you grew up during that time, you're familiar. A lot of your parents or you guys had this stereo, right? Look, let me show you. Probably just the best way to describe your stereos, to actually show you guys the stereo. You guys know this stereo. You guys remember that, right? That's from like old school stereo right there. It had sometimes it even had the CD player, record player, cassette. Monster, killer, classic. You know, and it's 2018, and I guarantee you that the stereo will outlive one that you bought new in the year of 2018. It's poor craftsmanship nowadays and just cheap materials. Now, you know, things change over the course of the day. They definitely don't make them, they don't make things like they used to. And that goes with everything. You know, look how cars are made now compared to how cars were made before. You know, and I think we gotta enjoy the vintage, right? Along with cars, it's one of those things that isn't made like it used to, and if it is, you're paying 10 times the amount. You know, I remember my parents had one of those too. They only threw it out like early 2000s, I believe, and even then it was still going. You know, you and underneath there, you usually similar cabinet like you seen in that picture, and you keep the vinyl records underneath, and you know, cassette tapes, you know that you accumulated years and years, and eventually, you know, cassettes and, you know, records became obsolete, and I think my parents threw most of them out. And I just remember, and I think, how much could those records be worth now, right? But when you look at that, just look at that cabinet, remember, too, right? They don't make cabinets like that anymore either. But would you want to, if you guys have OCD, imagine it would be an OCD nightmare trying to clean that glass 5 times a day. It'd probably drive someone mad. So, you know, and I think Sony made some higher end stuff for a very short while to kind of compete with the big boys during the 80s, but eventually gave into mass producing stuff that's made in China. The stereo system, it was a great stereo system. Now that the way they make them, it's nothing to get excited about. Sony, you know, now Kenwood, you know, Kenwood I don't think is no slouch either. And they make some good stuff too. You know, I remember having a Kenwood receiver, and it has a button that bypasses all tone controls and DSP, and it's like an analog bit perfect type of switch. Those were the days, man. And I think the one that we had was maybe it was even a Magnavox. And listen, I was looking at it. I thought, remember, that stereo system as a kid, I thought it was badass. And it had 2 black speakers that was almost as wide as the cabinet itself. And I think it's even the first time I saw a CD player. That's because it had a CD player. 88 or 89, I believe. 3 different formats, I believe it had. It had cassette tapes, CDs, and vinyl records. It had a equalizer that was fluorescent, same with the radio tuner, and it sounded So good. Real equipment, real sound. And I think like those speakers now, if you had it, it would definitely know and how to kick out that music, listening to some old rock and you know, and whatever classical song you could think of from back in the day. So now I wonder, did any of your parents, or did any of you guys build that stereo from you know? Did your parents ever build that stereo? I think they had. Back then they had you build your own stereo kits. Not as pretty and sleek as the 80s, as some of these 80s models that you've seen. Those speakers, though, you know, if I remember correctly, were so big that you use them for end tables. And now, to the you could use them as end tables next to the couches. I think they were maybe even Heath kit stereos and speakers, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken. I hope all is well. Just reminiscing about those speakers and the years gone by. Hope all is well. Look forward to speaking to you guys very, very soon.